Very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of Stuart Close Philosophy, the second chapter, the general interpretation. And we are on concluding part of this chapter. In this chapter, he has tried his level best to explain the homeopathy with scientific aspect. Many scientific thoughts he tried to explain. He has tried to correlate the principles of homeopathy with the principles of basic sciences, the biology, the physics, the chemistry. Then he has explained about the concept of all the laws and doctrines of all those basic sciences in relation with the homeopathic science. So these are very important, essential things which he tried to explain, and at the same time he tried to explain that homeopathy never deals only scientifically, but there is also science goes hand in hand with art. After explaining the correlation between science and art, he explained that homeopathy as a science, then homeopathy as an experimental science, and now he is explaining about the homeopathy as an art. And while explaining this, he explains what is there in homeopathy, with what the homeopathy deals and with which things homeopathy never deals. And first point which he has explained over there, homeopathy opposed to the physiological treatment or physiological chemical drugs um, in the application, and this is truth. In homeopathy we never gives just to palliate the disorder, but we used to use or think about the cure of the patient, and when you have to achieve the cure, there is only one way, that you have to give the medicines in the potentized forms on the basis of law of similars, then it is possible to achieve the cure. So we are there on the page number 20, the second paragraph. Homeopathy is opposed to the use under the ordinary conditions of drugs in physiological doses for mere palliative purposes, since its primary object is always cure or obliteration of disease and complete restoration of health. So this is the aim of every homeopath, to achieve a cure and not only the palliation. Homeopathy is opposed to the methods of vaccine and serum therapy, although it is claimed by many of these methods are based upon homeopathic principle. It grants that this may be true so far as underlying principle is concerned, but opposes the method of applying the principle is being violation of sound natural principle of medication and productive uh, of serious injury to the living organism. Very important paragraph one has to understand. Homeopathy opposes to the vaccines or vaccinum therapy because there are principles are rather different. What is the principle of vaccine? The principle of vaccine is there. Simillimum is opposed by simillimum. And this is not homeopathy. In homeopathy, there is no such a thing. Homeopathy, we have nature's law of cure. That is, weaker dynamic affection is permanently extinguished in the living organism by a stronger one if latter is very similar to former in its manifestation. So there is no question of repulsion. Vaccine therapy is based upon the principle of repulsion, and here it contradicts with homeopathy. Many people feels that it is homeopathic, but it is not at all homeopathic. Second important thing, whatever the vaccine or serum which is prepared, it contains the animal protein, and generally these animal proteins are very injurious to the human health. The average life of the animals, specifically these small animals, the rabbit, the dog or horse, all those, it is much less as compared to the human being. And when we inject the protein of those animals into the human being, the average age has become reduced. And people whose earlier generations, whose average life was found to be 125 years, now it has reduced to the half. No one considers this. No one thinks about it. And that's why there are very injurious, hazardous effects happens to the human being with the help of these vaccines. It has been proven experimentally and clinically that such methods are unnecessary, and that the results claimed by their advocates can be attained more safely, more rapidly, more thoroughly by administration of the homeopathic indicated medicines medicines in sub-physiological doses. So, through the natural channels of the body than by introducing it forcibly by means of hypodermic needle or in any other way. So this is one more thing which he is explaining, that whatever the medicines which we used to give in homeopathy is through natural route. Second thing, if you give the remedy to the human being, his constitutional remedy or similimum, it improves the general immunity, not a specific immunity. Vaccine therapy is based upon the specific immunity at the cost of general immunity. And that's why those, if you observe with open eyes in pediatric practice, after vaccination, the harmony gets disturbed and there are many respiratory allergies develops, and those children generally suffers from respiratory affections, often on coryza, often on bronchitis, often on asthmatic troubles, and these are the products of vaccinations more commonly. Homeopathy is opposed to so-called pathological prescribing or to the group treatment of diseases by which individual peculiarities are ignored and patients are grouped or classed according to their gross pathological organic lesions and treated alike. So we never treat the gross pathology because we cannot differentiate one remedy from another remedy on the basis of gross pathology. For example, patients, there are 10 patients of liver cirrhosis. We cannot prescribe on liver cirrhosis and will not going to give the same remedy. We have to find it out what are the previous functional symptoms, what is the individuality of that patient, and according to that, your remedy is based. So for 10 patients suffering from same pathology, in homeopathy, we have 10 different remedies, and those are individualistic. So we never prescribe on group treatment, we never prescribe on gross pathologies or end results. Homeopathy deals with the individual, not the class. It treats the patient, not a fictitious entity called the disease. Its prescription or selection of medicines is based solely upon the individual similarity of the symptoms, drug symptoms to the disease symptoms, determined by actual comparison of each case. So our remedy never depends upon what is the diagnosis of the patient. We never label the patient and accordingly treat the patient. So even though the patient is having pneumonia, we never prescribe on the basis of pneumonia. We prescribe what are the patient's features, what are the signs and symptoms, what are the sensations, what are the modalities, what are the concomitants, where exactly the location is there, what is the constitution of the patient, what is the miasmatic background of the patient, how is the susceptibility. Everything we have to take into consideration to find it out a right remedy. So this is too important for us. Here homeopathy differs from the rest of the sciences. Homeopathy is opposed to all forms of external local topical drug treatment of external secondary symptoms of disease except in surgical cases. And this is the truth. We never prescribe, we never applies the local applications. It opposes to it because it is not considered that whatever may be the skin disease is there, it is not considered as a local disease, but it is product of internal dynamic derangement of the vital force expressing externally in the form of such a symptoms. So derangement is at the center. You have to treat the center and not the periphery. If you treat the periphery, it enters inside, affects the most vital organ. It directs its curative agents through the natural channels of the body to the physiological centers of vital action and reaction, which govern all functional activities in the living organism, in disease as well as in health. So whatever the remedy we used to choose is we give through the natural channel, that is the commonest route is the mouth. Second important thing, it stimulates the vital centers and from center it works. If center which is disturbed, gets recovered, automatically peripheral features disappears under the action of it. Because peripheral symptoms are the product of disease center and we used to treat the center which is already diseased, we make it again on the ease, and that's why the peripheral symptoms also disappears once you treat the center. Homeopathy is opposed to the polypharmacy. It depends for all its results upon the dynamical action of the single pure potentiated medicines prepared by special mathematico-mechanical process and administered in minimum doses. So homeopathy never gives many remedies at a time. Very important word is at a time. So you cannot give or mix together the aconite, belladonna, bryonia together and give it to the patient. Yes, you might give the aconite present state. After some time, patient might require belladonna. You might give. It varies. It depends upon the state of the person. But at the same time, you should not give more than one remedy. And those remedies in the dynamic form, in the potentiated form, and in the minimum doses. In practice, homeopathy bases the selection of curative remedy upon totality of symptoms of the individual patient, including consideration of ascertainable causes of the disease. For the homeopathic prescriber, this constitutes disease. Speculations as to the inner, essential nature or working of the drug or disease does not enter into the process of selecting remedy. The prescription is not based upon the pathological diagnosis or name of the disease, but solely upon likeness of the symptoms of the patient to the symptoms of some tested drug, determined by actual comparison. So, when we prescribe in homeopathy, we never prescribe on the name of the disease. We never confirm our prescription on the basis of diagnosis. So our prescription is based upon what are the signs and symptoms, what is the totality, because that totality is the reflection of internal dynamic derangement of the disease. We never looks inside what is wrong with the patient. We looks outside to find it out what is the totality of the symptom. As the experimental work in constructing the homeopathic remedica has conducted with single medicines, and as each medicine has its own definite and peculiar kind and sphere of action, scientific accuracy as well as law of similars requires that treatment of the patient conducted in the same manner. So in homeopathy, we used to prove the remedy singly. We give single remedy to the prover. We used to wait for the symptoms to appear, and once symptoms appears, we stop giving the remedy, and then we go on recording the symptoms. The whole data available or we collect, and then we analyze it, and we form the materia medica. So we know each and every remedy how it acts, what symptoms it can produce. So we used to prove it on both sexes, different ages at a different times with different potencies, and because of which we know the whole data. So before prescribing, we are quite sure that how the patient will going to react to such a remedy. So confidence is there in prescribing when we give the remedy on the basis of law of similars. Medicines are never mixed or compounded in homeopathic practice, but are given singly. So this is very important point which he explains. Then he says it has been proven experimentally that the sick organism is peculiarly and even painfully sensitive to the action of similar medicine, and that curative effects are only obtained by subphysiological dose. So this is very important thing. Subphysiological means potentized. It is not in material form. We never give the mother tincture or any medicine in mother tincture form in 10 ml, 15 ml for the purpose of cure. If we are giving, it is only for palliation, not for the cure. If you want to produce cure, we have to give it in the subphysiological doses. Physiological doses, instead of removing the symptoms of the disease, produce by their direct pathogenetic action the characteristic symptoms of the drug. If drug be not a similar, the condition of the patient is complicated by additional symptoms having no relation to the disease and no cure results. If the drug be similar, the violent reaction of the organism to the unnecessary large doses increases suffering, exhausts the patient, and prolongs his disease, even if he eventually recovers. So he explains that if you give the physiological doses, you cannot cure. What you get might be a palliative action, or what you get might be their pathogenetic symptoms in the patients because of primary action of the remedy. And if even though your remedy is perfect, but it aggravates the complaints because it acts directly through the primary action and it affects the patient. So giving a remedy on the basis of law of similars in the physiological doses is not permissible in homeopathy. And then he says these facts led first to the progressive reduction of the size of dose to the smallest effectual curative quantity, and eventually to the discovery and formulation of law of potentiation and infinitesimal dose, which is one of the corollaries of the law of similars. Corollaries means going in hand in hand with infinitesimal dose. In, corollaries of law of similars and fundamental principles of homeopathy. So, if we find a very perfect remedy on the basis of law of similars, our work is not completely done. We have to judge the susceptibility, we have to look toward the constitution, we have to find it out the miasm, and then accordingly we have to think about the potency. Then it should be given in proper potency. Then we have to think whether to repeat and not to repeat. That is again a question of thinking or using the logic, and then actual application of remedy becomes. So it is not only law of similars which is important. Along with law of similars, law of drug dynamization and law of infinitesimal dose or minimum dose, that also goes hand in hand with the law of similars. The working principles of homeopathy therefore may be briefly stated as: number one, the totality of symptoms of the patient is the basis of medical treatment. So 4 points he has written over there, which are very, very essential. We cannot give remedy only on one symptom. Totality of the symptoms of the patient is the basis of medical treatment. Number two, the use of single medicines, the symptoms of the sphere of action of which have been predetermined by pure controlled experiments upon healthy person. So whatever the drugs we used to use are already proved on healthy human beings. We know the details about it and we give it in as a single remedy. Number three, the principle of symptom similarity as the guide to the choice of remedy. So, law of similars is the only working principle on the basis of which we used to give the remedy. And last, the minimum dose capable of producing a dynamic or functional reaction. So, law of minimum dose, that is very important law which we have to follow. So there is similia similibus curantur, the law of simplex, the law of simile, and law of minimum dose. These are very important laws which one has to take into consideration while dealing with the patient. So we have finished very big chapter where he has tried his level best to correlate homeopathic principles with the basic sciences, at the same time explaining the homeopathy as a science, homeopathy is a mm, experimental science, then the relation between science and art, and at last the homeopathy as an art. All those things he has tried to explain in this chapter, so that we have learned many aspects of homeopathy in first two chapters. Then there is a third chapter is not there for the syllabus of fourth year. Directly fourth chapter is there for the syllabus. So tomorrow we'll start with the fourth chapter, the scope of homeopathy. Okay. So that's all for today. And today evening we're going to meet with one more remedy from our Matra Medica, a wonderful remedy, short remedy from the Alensky notes, the Colophilum at 8:15. So be there and we'll learn many practical aspects of that remedy. So that's all for today. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.